Hello, and thank you for joining me for another episode of Total Ramblings. This episode, we are looking at the final episode of Star Wars Skeleton Crew on Disney Plus. Now, beware, there are going to be some really heavy spoilers. So if you haven't seen this final episode, maybe go and watch it and come back to me in a sec. Yeah? Okay, so we last saw our heroes, the children, being confronted with a couple of their parents by Jod in the vault, which they've just managed to reach. And Jod, probably quite sensibly in fact, sends a couple of the children off to be put under house arrest by some of the security droids and takes Fern with him. Probably what I would have done, split them up actually, where he goes off with Fern and her mum to see the supervisor, the mysterious supervisor. So they get up this gigantic tower, which is the equivalent of the tower they went up on one of the other planets they visited. And it's all very dusty up there, and there doesn't appear to be anything living up there. Whereupon, probably to no great surprise actually, it turns out that the supervisor is just a gigantic droid. I think we probably all suspected that was the case. I did see some people wondering whether it was the Tak Renard, the pirate, but I mean, I get the impression he died centuries ago. So, whether he'd become the supervisor, but I don't think so. But anyway, yeah, it's a giant droid. And Jod, essentially, Jod Naywood, whatever his name is, tries to convince the supervisor that he is indeed an emissary from the Republic and that he is a Jedi. But he's been slightly outwitted here because, and this is a nice callback to Revenge of the Sith, Star Wars Episode 3, because the supervisor says, well, that's very funny because the last thing I heard from the Republic, all the Jedi were traitors. So which one are you? You're lying about something. Because, of course, when the Republic became the Empire, then they declared all the Jedi traitors. It does make you wonder, though, why the Empire never followed up on visiting any of the Republic's galactic mints, because they must have known about them and presumably could have communicated with and travelled there. But, yeah. Maybe that'll be explained in a comic book or something. I just don't know. Anyway, Jod promptly takes out the supervisor by stabbing it through its optical receptor, its eye, whereupon, of course, all the security droids guarding the children also kind of drop dead. It seems very convenient in the Star Wars universe galaxy that killing one droid knocks out all the others. Apparently it knocks out all the power to the city as well, although Wim's dad is able to restore it later, so it wasn't really reliant on the supervisor, was it? So maybe a reflex action of being killed by somebody, switching off all the power, deactivating all the droids. Anyway, it's jolly handy. And essentially, Jod is able to get the pirate frigate to come in and land, whereupon it starts shooting up the ship. Some lovely lighting here, particularly when Wim and his dad are looking up at the frigate, and you kind of see the spotlights kind of shining over as it goes past. Really good. Now there's no power now, so their cars don't work. Everything's knocked out. However, conveniently, the hover bikes still work. And I like the nice little touch that when Neil and KB turn up with their bikes, there's a little bell sound. They've got bells on their bikes, which is quite nice. Anyway, the aim here, of course, is to get outside the barrier with the Onyx Cinder and call Kim, who is the owl person that we saw, because she will be able to call in support from the X-Wings that we saw in a previous episode. So there's a really good speeder bike chase. And I will say the speeder bike chase, they've learnt their lesson. Disney Plus have learnt their lesson from the Book of Boba Fett, where we had a very lackluster and very slow motion speeder bike chase on Tatooine with those mod type cyborg people. Very weak speeder bike chase. This was really good, a lot better. There's a sequence where they have to sort of jump the gap. a gap in the forest and all that, and it's very good, and it's quite tense. This is quite tense, this scene, so I liked it. But of course they get to the ship, and as we saw in the previously scene at the beginning of the episode, conveniently, there's two things here. Conveniently, the ship, the Onyx Cinder, has now been loaded with cash and is now on top. It's come up from the miles high tube landing pad and is now back on top, which is lucky for the children because they didn't know it would be back up the top, but it's secured by landing clamps. So this is where the kids really have to work as a team, and this is kind of where I think we get some real payoff here from the previous episodes in the series, because they've learnt how to work together as a team. They know how to trust each other. They can also work independently or as smaller groups. And I think actually there's a real payoff here. And I think you really everything kind of comes together for them, because the job is basically, number one, Neil is sent to man some laser turrets which are on top of some of the buildings in the city. Again, a callback to a previous episode, because we saw the identical layout of another city on one of the other planets that have now been deserted, and they had laser cannons there. So they know those cannons are there. But also they have to try and bring the barrier down, or at least, restore the power so they can release the docking clamp. So there's kind of a couple of different things going on here. And there's a brilliant bit where Wim confronts Jod and kind of distracts him while his dad activates the power, and Jod says, "You brought your dad?" And it's quite funny. And you can tell that Jod doesn't want to hurt anybody. Well, he says so. He doesn't want to hurt anybody. He just wants to be rich. So anyway, they managed to take off the Onyx Cinder, and KB is now piloting it with the help of SM-33, who she's holding up his head so he can pilot the ship, but he can see, and that's quite amusing. So she's not flying it on her own, so to speak. She's got an experienced pilot. In any way, the Onyx Cinder kind of escapes and broadcasts a signal to Kim, and she says, "Help's on the way, I'm going to call the New Republic." But the Onyx Cinder is hit. One of the engines is severely damaged and it spirals down to the ground. And Jod actually gets quite upset here because he doesn't want to hurt anybody, and he is quite attached to the children, even though he's a ruthless sort of pirate. And all throughout this episode, really, you've never known, are they going to kind of try and redeem Jod? Is he up to something else? Is it all a trick? No, he just wants money. He's a pirate, but he's not a particularly bloodthirsty pirate. Which is interesting, considering the events of the first episode when they were blasting their way onto a ship, but never mind. Jod reveals that no, he's not a Jedi, but he was found as a young child. He was living in a hole in the ground. He was found by a Jedi, and she taught him before being killed by the Empire, one presumes. So this is probably why he doesn't really know, he doesn't know the full Jedi lore, but he knows enough, and he's clearly a Force sensitive. But there's an interesting kind of speech here where he explains his origin, and he says, "The universe is a dark place, kids. It's dark with a few pinpricks of light," which is how space appears. Space is black, right, with just stars every now and then. So that I found that description quite appropriate. Anyway, the dad punches Jod out, and we have this battle over this big lever which can destroy the barrier. I'm quite glad that when the barrier does finally come down, the things generating the barrier aren't destroyed, they're just deactivated. So it's not like there's a big explosion. So you could switch it back on again, right? Which is, I like to see. And something occurred to me. So it's essentially the cloud that is the barrier dissipates, and the residents of At-Atin are looking up at the sky and seeing the stars for the first time. And it reminds me of the people of Cricket from the Douglas Adams book, Life, the Universe and Everything. So I'll small diversion here. So I said to the producer, small diversion here. So on the planet Cricket, which is surrounded by a dust cloud, the people on the planet live a kind of medieval type existence, and they're blissfully unaware that there's anything up there. They don't even look up at the sky because it's just grey all the time. and then one day a spaceship comes through the dust cloud and smashes on the ground, and they're like, oh, what's that? Where's that come from? So they manage to recycle the bits of the spaceship and build their own spaceship, and they go out amongst the dust cloud, and for the first time ever they see the vast infinity of space. And this kind of blows their minds a little bit, the two pilots of this ship, and one turns to the other and says, it's got to go. And I was just thinking, these people, they are at least aware of the galaxy, but they've never seen it before. And I'm just thinking maybe their reaction might be, it's got to go. Anyway, we then reach the crescendo, the climax of this episode. New Republic X-Wings and B-Wings appear. And basically, it doesn't take them long to blow the crap out of the pirate frigate, especially the B-Wings, who fire their sort of multi cannons, a bit like the Death Star gun, sort of collating sort of laser beams, which is what they're designed for. They're designed to take out capital ships, B-Wings. But I think we've only seen that before in Star Wars Rebels in animation before. We definitely didn't see it in Return of the Jedi, and I don't believe we've seen it before in live action, so that was really good to see. But a couple of shots from those B-Wings and a few strafing runs by the X-Wings, and I don't think the New Republic loses a single fighter, but that frigate is toast really quickly. And it crashes, and it's nice that when it crashes, it kind of crashes into the water, and it's clearly not going to get up again. But I like the fact that everything is not resolved with a big explosion. Too many Star Wars shows or other shows, even Doctor Who sometimes, everything's resolved with a big explosion. And I quite like the fact that there isn't a big explosion here. That was kind of nice and refreshing. And then when the kids go and rescue KB, because she has survived, the Onyx Cinder crashed into like a dome. The kind of door comes out and all this money pours out with her sort of on top of it. That was quite good. SM-33 is operational, albeit carrying his own head. I wonder if they'll make that a recur. If this series ever returns, I wonder if they'll ever make that a recurring thing, that he's just constantly carrying his own head. That might be quite funny. But yeah. But then, as a sort of New Republic CR-90 Corvette kind of comes in over the city, presumably to sort of reacquaint contact with At-Atin and the rest of the galaxy, it just stops. We have a really sudden ending. We have some nice visuals at the end of this in the credits, in that we see the storybook elements from Wim's kind of iPad device that he had in episode 1. And it ends, in fact, with all these stories of the Jedi in his storybook have now been added to, with a picture of the children on top of the Onyx Cinder as it sort of takes off. But we have a very sudden ending. And as for Jod sees the frigate going down and makes his escape, presumably, but I think he's still on the planet. It's clearly left open for another series, but will there be one? We don't know. I'd love there to be one, because I think this has been a really good series. What I really like about this is that we've had a brand new Star Wars story set in the Star Wars galaxy. We've got brand new characters, brand new planets, brand new everything. There's no hard reliance on lore here. You don't even have to know anything really. There's no reliance on hard lore. The characters and the worlds are unique, and I think this has been a really refreshing look at Star Wars with an adventure sort of / children's kind of perspective. If we'd gone back to Tatooine, I think I would have probably clawed my own eyes out, because we've seen, Tatooine is supposed to be as far from the centre of the universe as it could be, in Luke's words. But, we seem to revisit it all the time. And thank goodness we didn't do that in Skeleton Crew. This is a brand new, unique story. It's brilliant. I really liked it. As you've probably guessed, I'm a big fan of this, and I hope they do a second series. But of course, there's always the fear that a second series might not be as good. But I think it's definitely recommended. My only concern is that I understand that ratings haven't been that good, and I understand that might be because of people's reaction to The Acolyte. It's the same reason that the Han Solo film kind of flopped at the cinema, because people were reacting to The Last Jedi. I actually thought the Han Solo film was pretty good, to be honest with you. Solo, a Star Wars story, but that's just me. But the problem is if the Star Wars community, or even the general public, if the last thing Star Wars put out wasn't very good, then the next thing that comes out doesn't get very good viewings. So, yeah, I think that's a bit of a problem. And I think I think it's a possibility this might cause there not to be another series of the Skeleton Crew. But we'll have to see. But I thought Jude Law was excellent in this. I thought all the actors were brilliant in this. I really liked the story. It had a nice mix of prequel era Star Wars and post Return of the Jedi. I'm not going to say the S word. Post Return of the Jedi era Star Wars, with brief references to the original trilogy and the Imperial era, which is kind of my favourite era, if you like. So yeah, I would probably give this series, if I was rating this out of 10, it's got to be at least a 9, if not a 10 out of 10. It's been really good. Some of the lighting in this. So, for example, when the barrier comes down and suddenly the supervisor's tower is lit with this blinding light, and you kind of see Jod in this kind of illumination. It's some of the light, the scene setting, the planets, the characters, the lighting, the sound, the music, everything here really good. I guess perhaps some slightly juvenile elements to it because it's kind of intended more for children. But if you listen to George Lucas, so was the original Star Wars. So I don't think we can really complain about that. So definitely recommended. Hope we have more. And that's the end of this particular series of this vlog of Total Ramblings, because this, sub-series of Total Ramblings is now finished with the ending of Skeleton Crew. But I still hope you'll carry on watching Total Ramblings and joining me for the next episode, which I think might be coming in a few minutes because I've got a weekly roundup to do. I'd like to say thank you very much for watching, subscribing. Please hit the like button, please comment, share, do all the usual YouTubey stuff, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.